This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. Hi, this is Joe Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. What I'm going to do today is give you a stock market update, mainly focusing on the S&P. I'm going to go through the market conditions. I did want to mention that I finished the swing trading module, which is a separate course that goes with the trading school. The information is in the description if you have an interest. The foundations course, I do recommend doing that first. If you're new and you're looking at and learning about swing trading, you still need to focus on the foundations, learn the foundations first, and then the swing trading will make a lot more sense. But it is complete, and I've gotten some good feedback from it already. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. If there was ever a time to learn a little bit about swing trading, this is probably a pretty good time for it, at least the way that I'm teaching it. And the reason is that these trends are not lasting very long. They're swinging up and they're swinging down, and it's a little frustrating if you're trying to catch a trend. So we're going to go through all that. But if you notice, I've got these market conditions up now. The only thing that I changed is the overbought oversold went from 64 to 67, and the sentiment dropped. We had a 51% bulls last week. We're down to 49, and the difference between the bulls and the bears was at 27, and now it's at 24. Not a big difference, and everything else up here is the same. We're dealing with this environment where market tries to make a move to the upside, but it doesn't have great momentum behind it, and then it sends it back down, but the sellers are not strong. The general trend is to the upside on the daily and the weekly, but we've got this problem on the monthly. So I'm going to go into all of that in detail. First, let's cover what's taking place with respect to the, well, first of all, when we look at the sentiment and the overbought, oversold, we're getting up there, right? I mean, today was a huge day for the market, and maybe we get a little bit more follow through and get this into overbought territory. We haven't had that happen for quite some time. The last time was in February, where we were overbought based on a weekly chart looking at a 5 RSI. All right. Now, if that happens, we want to start watching the sentiment. Now, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic sell the moment this gets overbought, And even if this gets into the higher regions, like if we get about 55% bulls, then we want to start getting a little bit more worried, maybe a little bit more defensive about adding new longs. But what we want to do is go down to the smaller time frames and look for signs of distribution, look for signs of reversal. All right, so that's kind of where we stand with this right now. I'm looking at this overbought signal more than an oversold signal because of where the proximity is right now. Now, look at what the average true range is telling us about the volatility. Both of these are in a bullish camp. I've been mentioning this for quite some time. Really, since the beginning of April, we had this rolling over to the downside. Since the beginning of this year, the trend on the weekly has been positive. It's actually down, but that's a positive for the market because that means it's a reduced amount of volatility. When there's reduced volatility, that's bullish for the market. That's less signs of distribution when there's less volatility. That's happening from a short-term standpoint, and that began in about April. Now, we are starting to see the size of these bars are starting to grow a little bit. The question is, do we start to see choppy volatility take place? That's when you start to believe there's some distribution kicking in. These tiny bars like this are not distribution bars. It's just not what you'd be expecting. We're going to need to see big bars develop first and grow the volatility to the upside before we can expect a big drop to take place. So we want to keep an eye on this. Watch the size of these bars. That'll help you a lot. Okay, let's go ahead and go through the individual time frames and look at what happened in 1 week's time. Last week, we were talking about how this looked like it was failing at the 18-month and it was down near the lows, and we've come all the way back, and we're bumping up against this line, this 18-month line. It's right there. It's literally right underneath it right now. And I am looking at this and saying we've got 1 day left to the month. Do I really think this is failing. And I don't look at the reaction. Even when this was rising up here and we got below it, we got up and we came down. Here, we clearly failed at it when we rallied up to it. Here, we clearly failed at it because it not only dropped to here, but it dropped down here before it came back. It was a pretty good decline before we got a rally off of it. This time, we came down and we hit the 4. You see this 4? We're finding support at the 4. So we're caught between the 4 and the 18 month, 4 month and the 18 month. And the question is, who's going to win? Well, you could think that the 18 is going to win because it's a bigger time frame. But the way I look at it is this is like water building on a dam. We're not getting the reaction that we got the last couple times. So I'm more inclined to believe if we hold like this and we don't have a terrible day on Friday, then I'm more inclined to believe that we are going to push through this level. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to blow through 4,200 or this 420 area, but I think that will increase the probabilities of that happening. If, in fact, this is going to turn into something meaningful to the upside, I think a couple of things are going to happen. Number one, we're going to see green DI kick in, make a higher bottom above 25 and turn up. I just don't think we can move up with this type. And you saw what happened when it tried to move up like that. Look at how it dropped. It gave back a significant portion of the gain in a very short period of time because we didn't get that kind of confirmation. So we got to see that if we're going to expect any kind of explosive move through this breakout zone. The other thing that I really would like to see is green DI down here. So let's just zero in on this. I'm going to pull this up because I think this is pretty important. If you notice that this peak here coincides with this peak right there, all right? And then we came back and we almost made a double top, not quite, and this is a lot lower. Do you see how much lower that is? So I think if this is going to go and break out through 420, we're going to need to see this come back up through this prior peak. This is a pivot high. This would be a new pivot high, taking out that prior pivot high, and we need to get above that right there. That's gonna be confirming evidence. Now, I don't necessarily need to see this rip roaring to the upside, but I gotta see the buyers confirm this move. If we don't have that, then you have to be very, very suspect of a cross above this red horizontal line to the upside. We're still in the same boat that we were, but this week is improving, generally speaking, because we came down pretty close to the 18-week. We didn't quite make it. We got pretty close. We did hit a very key line that my subscribers know if they're looking that we had talked about, but we have not. We didn't quite make it to the 18-week line. So now it's all about, do we break out? Do we fail here and turn back down? And we go to the daily chart. The good news about this rally is that we're already back above the daily line. The bad news is this daily line kind of flattened out here, right? The other bad news, and let's just zero in on this because I do think it's irrelevant. There's a couple things. Number one, this drop caused the MACD to roll down. So what I typically look at when this crosses up and this is down like this is that we're not going to go straight up. We're going to do something like this. We could consolidate a little bit, but that could all take place, over the course of 3 to 4 days. It doesn't have to last weeks or anything like that. Based on the strength of this rally, I think we have to respect that a little bit. Now, I've already mentioned I want to see green DI do a little bit better. It's still 24.54. This isn't even in above 25 yet. So we're going to need to see some improvement. But here's the thing that bugs me is look at the volume. This was a huge day for the market, up 2%. This index up 2%. It's less volume than the 2 down days. So you gotta take everything. You gotta go day by day still. We've got to still factor in this key resistance zone. Don't get too excited one way or another. Let's look for a little bit more evidence. And this is one thing I wanted to get across to you, that if you're going to see moves like this, where this moves down and we get a big, strong ADX with MACD confirmation on the decline, and then an immediate move like that, when this happens? When we're like this. When we are in transition, and we're in transition in 2 directions. We're in a transition to the downside. We've done a break of the trend line and rally to test, and we're in a transition to the upside. We've broken the trend line to the upside. and this trend line to the upside and have tested, and now we're very close to turning up and making the 3 here, coming up through this red line. So when we're in that position and we're in what I call transition, because we're not in a confirmed uptrend and we're not in a confirmed downtrend, that's when you get this whippy action that doesn't have a lot of follow through. And that's where, if you start to look for compression plays, as I talk about in the course, you can get in and out in a couple days and maybe make some profits. And that can be to your advantage in this environment. Now, I don't think this is going to last that much longer in terms of a non-trending environment. I think it's going to pick a trend here pretty soon, but we have to wait and get some confirmation. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.